this Parliament can work. I think Canadians expressed themselves only last April, the end of April, on the Carney plan, on the plan to diversify trade markets, to create opportunities, to attract $1 trillion of investment and to make life more affordable. Unless Mr. Poilievre continues with his obstruction, there's no way that that plan should not receive the approval of this Parliament. Mr. Poilievre has to get out of the way and allow his MPs to vote on an ambitious crime-fighting agenda, to vote on a plan to grow our economy.
Hi there and welcome back to a special edition of Power Play, live from the foyer of the House of Commons. That was Government House Leader Steve McKinnon talking about the legislative sitting ahead. This is the first day of the House of Commons here in 2026. Now to get the opposition's view, we're joined by Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer. Hi, Mr. Scheer. It's good to see you as always.
Great to see you back.
Thank you very much for making the time. I wanted to start off on the question of what they're announcing today, the prospect of legislation to bring forward this boost to the GST rebate. If the legislation is focused on that kind of straight up and down what they described today, is that something the Conservatives will support?
Well, what we said is, as you say, if they bring a clean bill to Parliament, just what they announced today, then we'll allow it to pass. We've seen in the past Liberals make an announcement, but then when they bring the legislation through, there's some clauses in there, as they did with their budget, where they tried to write themselves the power to exempt ministers from other legislation aimed at protecting Canadians. But if they come to the House with this, we'll allow it to pass. Now, that doesn't mean that we think this is the best approach. This is a temporary measure. It's something that Justin Trudeau tried. They are recycling old Trudeau-era policies that not only didn't help with affordability, but prices kept rising. We've called on them to do permanent things that will permanently help bring food prices down, eliminating the industrial carbon tax, the fuel standards tax. Those are all things that stack together on top of each other and drive up food costs. Repealing those measures, those Liberal laws, would be a permanent fix, or at least a permanent alleviation. What they're announcing today is temporary.
So a couple of things. It is temporary in that it'll only last 5 years. It's different from what the Liberals did in 2022, only insofar as that was a temporary doubling over 6 months. This is a doubling this year, plus the 25% over 5 years. On the idea of, you know, other things that they could do to bring down the overall cost of food, I put a lot of what you just mentioned to Finance Minister Champagne a few moments ago, and he didn't rule any of it out. Are you sure that in the aggregate, all of what you said will actually decrease food prices? Because you also said that about the consumer carbon price. In the inflationary, like, food inflation kept going up.
Well, it kept going up because Liberals kept running massive inflationary deficits. Inflation is always a monetary phenomenon. When governments expand the money supply, when they borrow vast sums of money and wash it through the system, it's going to cause inflation. That's why this will be so temporary. If you have me back in a year or two, even 6 months, I guarantee you those grocery prices will still be going up because the government has not, Mark Carney has not changed course from Justin Trudeau's inflationary approach to the economy and to monetary policy. Now, what we are saying is that, like the carbon tax, when the government tried to take credit, when the Liberals fought against scrapping the carbon tax, they tried to take credit for inflation easing for a period of time when the consumer carbon tax was finally taken off. That's something that Conservatives will remind Canadians about and remind Liberals about. If they get rid of the fuel standard tax, that will be a measurable decline. Right now, it adds 7 cents a litre to the cost of gas. Every vegetable, every pound of beef has to get transported from somewhere to a grocery store. Those extra fuel taxes add to those costs. I saw you put the question to Minister Champagne about the packaging tax. The Liberal, he talked about making Canada more resilient by getting more packaging done in Canada. Well, the Liberals have a ban on using plastic in packaging that our other countries don't have to face. So there's lots of measures that we're calling on them that would have a much more permanent effect on grocery prices. What they've announced today, it means the government has to borrow more money to pay for it, and as inflation continues to go up, it's going to be evaporated. And when we're talking about the scope of it, let's not forget, this is about one trip to the grocery store worth of relief. Under this Liberal government, under Mark Carney, Canadians, working family, is going to pay over $17,000 a year just in groceries. this isn't the fix that Canadians were looking for.
But the scope of your fix that you're talking about, that's my question to you. I take your criticism of what the government is proposing. But if you get rid of the clean fuel standards, for example, if you get rid of what you describe as additional food packaging costs, what they talk about as plastics regulation, how much cheaper is food actually going to be? Because when you talk about the inflationary component of government spending, you've also today frequently invoked a comparison with the United States and how food is cheaper there. Well, their deficits are, on a proportionate basis, far greater than Canada's. So if your argument were true, would their food inflation not also be greater too?
Well, Canada does not the Canadian dollar is not the world's reserve currency. So the U.S. economy is protected from inflation in a much different way. Oil isn't settled in Canadian dollars. International through the IMF and World Bank isn't settled in American dollars.
They're spending so much more than ours.
That is true. But other countries around the world buy so much government debt. And hold on to so much actual cash in all around the world. Canada doesn't get the benefit of being the world's reserve currency. Now, if we are talking about what we could do to strengthen the purchasing power of dollars, when foreign investment comes into Canada to, say, build a pipeline, or when other countries are wanting to buy our Canadian oil and gas, then that strengthens the Canadian dollar. And that means when Canadians go to buy a banana from South America or fresh fruits and vegetables in the winter, that their purchasing power will be stronger. Those are much more permanent ways to address the inflation crisis. Borrowing money, stacking that, increasing the deficit, to provide this benefit. Not only is it temporary, but the scope of it is is comparatively to what Canadians are spending on groceries, not the relief they were looking for. What we are talking about is leaving that money back in the economy in the first place, not to tax it in the first place with the industrial carbon tax. You know, it took us a while to get the Liberals to agree with us on the consumer carbon tax. Maybe they'll change their mind on the industrial carbon tax, but that adds the cost of fertilizer, it adds the cost of farm equipment.
I know, but that's the same argument you made around the consumer carbon price, right? That, I know, but it didn't. But food is not cheaper. Like you guys said, we're gonna take it away, and it's gonna be cheaper at the grocery store, and that wasn't the case. You didn't say if we got rid of all these other 15 things, that will happen too. Your promise was very singular.
No. If you go back and remember, Pierre Poilievre was the only person, the only federal politician anyway, who was raising the alarm bell on inflation, saying that the way the Liberals were approaching the deficits, how they were forcing the Bank of Canada to flood the economy with brand new cash, brand new money without any economic growth to back it up, that was going to cause inflation. He has been talking about a whole suite of issues that affect food prices. Yes, absolutely, the carbon tax added to that.
I mean, the slogan was axe the tax.
It was also fix the budget. It was also fix the budget, which was a big part of that. And even the Bank of Canada governor admitted that the carbon tax was a big culprit in inflation. Obviously not the only culprit. A huge part of the inflationary pressures that Canadians are forced to pay is when governments borrow massive amounts of money, increase the money supply, more dollars chasing fewer goods or the same amount of goods will lead to price increases. That's basic math, it's basic economics, and these Liberals refuse to acknowledge that. And what we're saying is with their announcement today, we'll let it pass because it is something. There will be, but when working families are paying over $17,000 a year in grocery prices, thanks to 10 years of Liberal inflationary policies, this maybe provides relief for a week's worth of, one trip to the grocery store's worth of relief. It's not what they're looking for. It's definitely not permanent.
Something else that I was, when I was reading about what would permanently impact food prices, that kept jumping out at me was supply management, because there are, two different studies I read. One said between $300 and $444 a year could be cut if that was amended. Another said $600 a year for Canadian families. You yourself, I remember when you were leader of the party, and your party more largely has never even thought about addressing that. Why not, if that would have a permanent impact?
Well,
is it political expediency?
No, every time someone brings up the idea, the first question is, well, how do you buy out if that were to be contemplated, it would come with massive costs in the front end. And there's so many things we can do right now. Like we could reduce that, we could eliminate the industrial carbon tax today without having to compensate anybody.
Would that save me $600 a year at the grocery store?
These are all a suite of packages. If we started working back towards balanced budgets, if we started to strengthen the Canadian dollar by approving large energy projects So more foreign investment was converting their dollars into Canadian dollars that would give everybody more purchasing power. If we got rid of the industrial carbon tax, if we got rid of the food packaging tax, the fuel standard tax, those are things that you don't have to compensate anybody else for. So that's the low-hanging fruit. That should be a no-brainer. It took the Liberals 10 years to finally admit that we were right on the carbon tax. I'm hopeful that they'll finally agree with us on the other ones.
And I
too.
remember your party very much sort of, combating the Liberal ideology around that carbon tax by saying, like, you're doing something that isn't good for Canadians just because you're ideologically wedded to it. That's why I put supply management to you as well. Like, if you're politically wedded to an idea that ultimately would have a better impact on Canadians at the their experience at the grocery store, like, aren't you doing the same thing?
No, because there's no benefit to the carbon tax. There's no benefit to it. There are definitely benefits.
It was 9% of the reduction by 2030 of the emissions in Canada.
Look, I mean, even the Liberals admitted that it did. Canada fell to the bottom of the pack in the OECD countries when it comes to climate change. That's not my talking point. That's not what Conservatives are saying. That's what independent analysis from non-partisan observers just by doing calculations. So there's no benefit to that. There clearly is a benefit to many communities, many producers with the supply management system. What we're saying is, rather than looking for solutions or ideas that might cost a lot of money on the front end, let's do the things that don't cost government or taxpayers a cent, because we're leaving that money back in Canadians' pockets. And by strengthening the Canadian dollar, by working back towards balanced budgets, then we're not just talking about grocery prices, we're talking about all prices. We can stabilize the cost of living in Canada. That's something that Liberals just refuse to do.
One final question for you about the upcoming leadership review. I was looking back at results from other leaders. Stephen Harper in 2005, close to 85%. Does Mr. Poilievre need to get a number like that to retain the confidence of the party?
I'm not going to prejudge or predict. I believe that we're going to get a good result. I've spoken to members of caucus, members of our party. They recognize that with Pierre, we achieved historic levels of support. We broke 40% for the first time in the modern Conservative Party history. We won seats all across the country in areas that nobody ever thought we could win. I'll bet you, I understand you're coming to convention. I guarantee you're going to meet people that have never been to a convention before, because I met people during the campaign that never voted Conservative before. They did because of Pierre's inspirational leadership. We're going to build on that, and we were going to come out of this convention more united than ever. With
respect, is that the pitch? You almost won? Are you unwilling to provide any kind of number because you're not sure if you'll be able to meet it?
No. I defer to the members. We are a grassroots party, and we let them make the decisions. When you think about what the Liberals had to do to win, I know I've had this conversation before, and we are Conservatives. We hold each other accountable, and we all recognize that the approach to the next election will have to have some elements that are different, but we don't want to lose what we've got. It took the Liberals barge pulling a sitting prime minister who didn't want to go. They had to dump their leader. They then had to disavow policies that they had said were core values that were part of their DNA. They had to completely abandon them, do a 180 in order to hang on to power. So yes, we have to look at what we need to do to get to the next election, but let's not forget that it took the Liberals making desperate measures. The advantage the Liberals have is that they are unburdened by principle. So they can make these kinds of pivots in campaigns, pretend to be something that they're not. Conservatives, we have core principles that we believe in that form the pillar of our party and our movement. And Pierre has been the champion for that. He's also been the champion for the working class in this country who are tired of inflation robbing the power of their paychecks, tired of the crime that's plaguing our communities. And he's the only one that's committed to doing something about it. So we're confident that we're going to take that positive message to the Canadian people in the next election and be successful.
Okay, I'm out of time. I appreciate your time. We'll see you at the convention. I'm sure we'll speak again. I appreciate it, Mr. Scheer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you in Calgary.
You bet.